to Dinner with the DeRestas, where we are cooking through the recipes that our family loves. Today, we will be making Jean Refner's red sauce. Okay, you can stop it. We're going to put the ingredients.
Oh, we're going to edit this?
Before we get started, let's talk tomatoes. Doesn't matter what kind of tomatoes you use for your red sauce. Technically, it does not. However, the red sauce does turn out better if you use tomatoes that are typically sweeter, have less juice and seeds, and a meatier texture. If you were in Italy, you would make yours out of San Marzano tomatoes. Do we have some San Marzano tomatoes? Not really. To be a San Marzano tomato, you have to be grown near Naples, Italy, at the base of Mount Vesuvius in the volcanic ash. San Marzano tomatoes can be canned. If you buy them in the United States, those from Italy can be pricey, anywhere from $20 to $30 for a can of certified San Marzano tomatoes. You can get San Marzano style tomatoes canned here if you're in a pinch where they're not fresh. This runs anywhere from about $3 up to $6 at a supermarket. If you don't want to use San Marzano tomatoes, you can also use a Roma or a plum tomato. And I will cut into one. I actually grow my own tomatoes. I grow Romas and I grow mini San Marzano style tomatoes because I like the idea of not having pesticides and always having them on hand. But if we cut into a Roma tomato, we can look and see, like I said, that they're not quite as watery. They have a lot of meat to them, and there's less seeds in them than in a typical slicer tomato. And so moving on, we're going to start the process. Okay, we're going to begin by roasting our tomatoes, our onions, and our garlic. This may be a little controversial. I do not actually peel my tomatoes. I prefer to leave the skin on, and we'll talk about that a little later on. But how much do we need? Well, I have around 60 of these mini San Marzano style tomatoes. I'm going to just put them on a baking sheet. And yes, this baking sheet is well loved. I inherited it from my grandmother. I love the weight of it. It's not much to look at. I do have it lined with aluminum foil just to make for easier cleanup. So we're going to put our tomatoes on. And after we put our tomatoes on, how many do we need? We need about 60 of the mini tomatoes. If you were going to use Roma tomatoes, somewhere between 10 to 12 Roma tomatoes would be sufficient. Then this is going to make enough sauce for 1 pound of pasta. Okay, so we're going to cut our tomatoes, our onions. We don't have to cut them up completely because we just need them a little larger than the size of the tomatoes so they will roast at about the same time. Okay, and if you see, I've got the scraps. Do not ever throw your scraps away. That's for another day. We're going to talk about how to save money by using your scraps in other ways. So do not throw away your scraps. Keep them. I usually keep them in a freezer bag and freeze them until it's time to use them. So we're going to cut these up into pieces that are, like I said, comparable to the sizes of the tomatoes. Saving my scraps. Sprinkle these on the baking sheet along with the tomatoes. Again, these are sweet onions. Specifically, these are Vidalia onions, and if you're from the South, you know it's kind of a delicacy. They're grown in southern Georgia, and they really are a delicious onion. Okay, so on our baking sheet we have tomatoes, onions. We're going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil, mostly just so that they don't stick to the foil, and so that salt sticks to them. We're going to use coarse kosher salt and just kind of sprinkle it around. This is really not for flavor. It's more to draw moisture out of the produce because that will intensify the taste for us. So we're going to go ahead and stick this in our oven. I don't have it preheated because we're going to turn the broiler on. I put it down low and we will start the broiler. With the mini tomatoes, they will roast for about 20 to 25 minutes. If you were to use Roma tomatoes, you need to up that time to somewhere between 35 and 40 minutes generally is good. Okay, now we're going to roast a whole head of garlic. We're going to cut the top off. And again, we're saving our scraps. Once again, we're going to use some olive oil just to make sure it doesn't stick. And we're going to put it in aluminum foil and roast the entire head. Now when you're filling this up, make sure that you leave yourself enough space that the garlic doesn't actually touch the foil because it will stick. And we're going to stick that right in with our other pan. And this should be done about the same time, 20 to 25 minutes. If you were using Romas, you would just put it in a little later in the process. Okay, our tomatoes and onions have finished roasting, and we're going to use this handy little tool that I absolutely love. It is a food meal, and yes, I do. I keep all the boxes of most of my appliances and then wash them and put them back in. But it is called a food meal. My grandmother, growing up, called it a tomato meal. It can be used for many things other than tomatoes, but primarily she used it for tomatoes. And I'll show you how it's a little piece. It sits on top of a pan or a pot, some kind of bowl. You've got the meal part actually, and then you have different size grades. There's a coarse, a medium, and a super fine grade. I personally like to use the coarse for making red sauce and making most of my sauces because I like that rustic, kind of heavier grain. But you put this together, and one of the beauties of this is it's actually machine washable, so you can stick it in the dishwasher. You may have to soak the actual grape part a little bit because to get all the little pieces of food. but it's just so handy. You simply take your roasted tomatoes and onions, and we'll eventually get the garlic in here as well. And I like to do this a little bit at a time. Put them in the meal. And you just spin. And it chops up the skin, the meat, the onions into very fine pieces. And I'm just doing it directly into the saucepan that I'm going to be finishing off the sauce in. So you may be thinking, what if you don't have a food mill, a tomato mill? You could do this with a food processor. You could do it in your blender. I just like the way, I like the consistency that it gives, that it looks rustic. It definitely looks like you put some time and effort into it. But no, feel free to use whatever you have. Like I said, I use this meal for more than just red sauce. I make a lot of Tex-Mex style sauces with it. I've actually done purees with mangoes and berries. You can use it to make baby food. It really does have a lot of uses. Like I said, and it is totally dishwasher safe, which is a big deal in this house. And we've now popped our garlic out, so we're gonna run it through the mill. So we finished running our roasted tomatoes, our roasted onion, and our roasted garlic through the food mill. And if you were to look in there, there's some little bits of skin and just pieces of onion and garlic that did not go through. So we're actually going to run our wine and our vodka through that to get the rest of the seasoning out. Okay, why wine and vodka? Well, traditionally red sauce is made with wine, and I have 1 cup of red wine here. This is Cabernet Sauvignon. It can be white wine. It's all a matter of taste. White wine will actually give you a different color, a lighter looking sauce. As far as the taste, it is much more bold when you use a red wine. But so I'm going to pour my red wine in there, and it's running through, and it's getting the last little bit of pieces out. Okay, now I also have a cup of vodka, and this is not clear vodka, obviously. I get very, very inexpensive vodka because I like the bite of it. And I also put some black peppercorns and crushed red pepper in, and I fuse it so it has a bolder taste with a little bit of heat and a little bit of spice to it. You can do it the night before, 2 days before. You can let it sit for as long as you want, really. And I put it in a lot of different things. So we're gonna add our vodka. And again, I just like to use vodka and wine because it's different flavor components in each of them. Why use either? Tomatoes have certain compounds in them that are only soluble in alcohol. That means if you don't use any kind of ethanol drink, there are parts of the tomato that you will not ever see the flavor profile. What if you do not want to use alcohol? That is perfectly fine. My suggestion would be to use 1 cup of water and a couple tablespoons of balsamic vinegar and a pinch of sugar. You won't have to cook it quite as long, especially if you're not cooking it out, but that will keep the alcohol content down. But one last time, we're going to run it through. And now we're ready to heat. Turn on the heat to medium low. We're going to bring this to a simmer. Right now, we are not going to season this because we're going to reduce it some. If we were to put salt in right now, there's a chance that it would be too salty at the end. So once we're ready to take the heat off, we will salt according to our taste. We will not be peppering this because we did the infused vodka. And again, you just don't want little bits of pepper in your sauce. It kind of ruins the texture and the consistency. So we're going to let this simmer from the time it comes up, 15 to 20 minutes. We've been simmering our sauce for about 10 minutes. And about 10 minutes from now, we're going to turn the heat off. We will season it with salt and we will add our fresh basil. Okay, 20 minutes has lapsed and our sauce is thickened. We've reduced a lot of the moisture down. So we have this nice, hearty, rustic sauce, but it's time to season it. So before we do anything, we're going to take a taste right now to see where it sits. Okay, it's very sweet, which is perfect. It needs just a hair more salt. So I'm going to sprinkle just a bit in. Stir it around. Come back in for a taste. That's perfect. That's exactly how I want it. It has just enough salt to bring out the flavor of the vegetables without too much to be overpowering. So now we're going to add the basil. And why do I wait to the end to add the basil? I like for it to keep as much of its color as we can. Now technically you are supposed to tear basil and put it in. But that would take quite a while. So I have a little trick that my grandmother wouldn't like, but it makes it so easy. I use kitchen shears and cut them into strips directly into the bowl, the saucepan. And although it is technically not the way you're supposed to add basil to a sauce, I find it makes it just so much easier. Less time involved, easy cleanup. I do grow my own basil. This basil was picked this morning. It was washed and dried through a salad spinner. Basil is very easy to grow. You can either start them from seeds, which I do. You can start them from a cut from your plant, a plant you buy, even at a supermarket, a friend's plant, or you can transplant even the supermarket living basil plants. This is a lot of basil. I love basil. If you don't like the sweet peppery taste as much as I do, you can definitely use less. Okay, at this point, our sauce is complete. And normally this would be where you could stir in a pound of cooked pasta. And how much is a pound? Typically that's what's in a box. It will be not super saucy, but since this is hot, it will soak into the noodles. It will be super flavorful. But we're going to save this for something else special that we're going to make. You also may be asking, it seems like a lot of work for one dinner. Well, we made just enough sauce for a pound of pasta. Typically when I do this, I double, triple, or quadruple the recipe, and I put them into freezer bags, freeze them flat, date them, and have them ready for when it's a busier time in our lives, or just when tomatoes aren't really in season. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this. I hope you've learned something. I hope my daughter appreciates the time that we're putting into this, because I know she is very much wants to learn the recipes that she grew up eating. And until next time, Bon appetit.